Hey everybody, welcome back. You ready to go deep on something we all deal with?
Oh, yeah, I'm ready.
Awesome. So today, it's all about friendship,
I'm okay.
but with a bit of a twist, right? Because we're not just talking about those amazing, supportive, ride or die kind of friends.
Right.
We're getting real about those trickier relationships, the ones that might actually be doing more harm than good.
Yeah, those are the tough ones.
They are. And, I think we've all encountered a friendship like that at some point.
Oh, for sure. At least one or two.
Right, exactly. So that's why we're doing this deep dive today.
I like it.
Because we've got this source that dives into the psychology behind toxic friendships.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's super insightful. And the best part is, it doesn't just help us spot those red flags.
Okay.
It also gives us really practical advice on how to deal with them.
Perfect. Because a lot of people are probably thinking, okay, I know I have a toxic friend, but what do I do about it?
Exactly. That's what we're going to tackle.
Hmm.
So to get us started, let's define this term toxic friendship. What does that actually mean? Because sometimes we can be quick to label a friendship as toxic, maybe after one bad fight or disagreement. But our source is talking about something a bit deeper.
Right, definitely. It's
Yeah.
not just about occasional conflicts. It's about those consistent patterns of behavior that are actually harming your well-being.
Okay, so it's about those recurring patterns.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a lot of sense because sometimes we overreact to one instance, but it's when you see the same behavior over and over.
Right.
That's when those alarm bells should really start ringing.
Exactly. It becomes a pattern. And our source mentions some really clear red flags to look for.
Yeah.
Things like disrespecting your boundaries, manipulating you, constantly bringing negativity into your life, or never offering any support.
So it's like they're taking and taking without ever giving back,
Hmm.
which actually reminds me of one of the specific red flags I mentioned, the one-sided trap. Have you ever experienced this?
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us have. And it's so draining. You're always the one offering support, listening,
Right.
but you never really get anything back. It's like you're constantly making deposits in this friendship bank account, but the other person is just withdrawing all the time.
That's the perfect analogy. And no wonder you feel depleted,
Mhm.
right? Like you're emotionally bankrupt.
Totally. And what's tricky is that the person who's always taking might not even realize they're doing it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's not always intentional, but the impact is still the same.
Yeah.
What do you do in that situation?
Well, I think it all starts with communication, which is something our source really emphasizes.
Okay.
Like sometimes just having an open and honest conversation can make a huge difference. Like you can say, hey, I feel like I'm always the one supporting you. I need you to be there for me too.
It's about being upfront about your needs, which can be hard.
It can be, especially if you're not used to it.
Mhm.
But setting those boundaries is so important. We'll definitely dive deeper into boundaries later on.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. But first, let's talk about another red flag that really stood out to me, the constant critic. And this one feels a bit tricky because sometimes we need honest feedback from our friends. Right.
Absolutely.
Like, how else are we supposed to grow and learn?
I agree. Constructive criticism is valuable. But what we're talking about here is different. This is about that friend who's constantly putting you down, making you doubt yourself, and never seems to have anything positive to say.
Yeah. It's like they're trying to dim your light instead of helping you shine.
Exactly. And sometimes that negativity can even stem from their own insecurities.
Hmm. Interesting. So sometimes their criticism is less about you and more about them.
It can be. It's like they're projecting their own stuff onto you.
That's a helpful way to look at it because it helps you take back your power, right? Their negativity doesn't have to define you.
Right. And sometimes that realization alone can help you detach from those criticisms and not take them so personally.
Oh, I love that.
Okay.
But before we move on to the next red flag, I have to mention the one that just made me laugh out loud when I read it, the drama magnet.
Oh, yes. Everyone knows a drama magnet.
Right. It's like they can't exist without a constant whirlwind of chaos around them.
Exactly. It's exhausting just thinking about it. And for some people, drama can be really alluring.
It's exciting.
Totally. It's a distraction. But just like with anything addictive, that high is fleeting, and the long-term consequences aren't worth it.
So it's about being aware of our own tendencies and making conscious choices about who we let into our inner circle.
Exactly. Who you surround yourself with has a huge impact on your energy. And speaking of making choices, one thing that stood out to me in this source is that it's not always about just cutting people off the moment you see a red flag.
Okay. So there's a middle ground.
There can be. Sometimes just having an open and honest conversation can make a world of difference.
Okay. So it's about communication again.
Yes, it's about saying, hey, this behavior is hurting me, or I need you to respect my boundaries, and then you can decide together if there's a way to move forward in a healthier way.
So it's not about ghosting them or burning bridges, but maybe setting some boundaries,
Yeah.
limiting contact or expressing how their actions are impacting you.
Right. And ultimately, it's about remembering that you deserve to have friends who support you and uplift you.
It's about prioritizing your own well-being. Because sometimes we get so caught up in trying to fix a friendship that we forget to take care of ourselves.
Exactly. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both of you is to step back.
I love that. So it's like hitting the pause button instead of the eject button.
Yeah.
And speaking of tools for taking stock of our friendships, our source mentions this friendship inventory. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah. It's a great way to really reflect on your relationships and see where you might need to make some adjustments.
So it's not just about identifying the toxic ones,
Mhm.
but also about celebrating those friendships that bring joy and meaning into our lives.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me more about how this friendship inventory works. What kind of questions does it ask?
Well, it asks things like, do your friends energize or drain you? Do they support your growth? Do they respect your boundaries?
So it's about getting really specific about what you need and deserve in your friendships.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing the unique gifts that each friend brings to the table.
This is so cool. It's like we're getting a sneak peek into the psychology of friendship. And I'm already making a mental note to do my own friendship inventory later.
Me too. It's
Yeah.
a really valuable exercise, especially since our source goes a step further and talks
Yeah.
about the different roles that we play in each other's lives. Like, not every friend is going to be our everything, right?
Brian, of course.
Some are amazing listeners, some are great advice givers, and some are just plain fun to be around.
Okay, so we're going to dive into those different roles in just a bit. But first, let's take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors. We'll be right back to continue our deep dive into toxic friendships. Okay. So we're back, and before the break, we were starting to get into this whole idea of friendship roles, which I think is so fascinating because it really highlights that not every friend is meant to fulfill the same role in our lives.
Right? It's like having a diverse team for all of life's challenges and celebrations.
I love that analogy.
Yes.
And it's so true. Like, think about it. Some friends are our go-to for emotional support.
Absolutely.
Always there to lend a listening ear. Offer a shoulder to cry on.
Right.
Others are the ultimate cheerleaders, pushing us to chase our dreams, celebrate our wins.
Yes. And then there are those friends who are brutally honest.
Oh, yeah.
The ones who tell us when we've got spinach in our teeth, or that our new haircut isn't exactly doing us any favors.
So true. And I think it's so helpful to recognize these different roles.
Oh, definitely.
Because it allows us to appreciate each friend for what they bring to the table.
Right. Instead of expecting every friend to be everything.
Exactly. Because no one can be our therapist, cheerleader, comedian, all rolled into one.
Yeah. And I think it also helps you understand your own tendencies. Like, are you always the listener in your friendships?
Interesting.
The advice giver, the social butterfly who brings everyone together?
Oh, yeah. I can definitely see those patterns in my own friendships.
Yeah, me too. And recognizing those patterns can help you cultivate more balanced relationships.
I love that. It's like a personality test for friendship.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me more about these different roles. What are some of the key ones that our source mentions?
Okay, well, they talk about the listener or emotional supporter. This is that friend you call at 3 a.m. when you just need to vent.
We all need that friend.
Yeah.
The one who just listens without judgment, doesn't try to fix everything.
Exactly. Just pure empathy and understanding.
Okay, what else?
Then you've got the cheerleader or motivator.
Yes.
This is the friend who's always hyping you up, pushing you to be your best self.
Love those friends. They're like your personal cheer squad.
Totally. Always ready with a pep talk and a high five.
Okay, so we've got the listener and the cheerleader. What else?
Well, there's also the reality checker. The friend who isn't afraid to tell you the hard truths,
Oh, yeah.
even if it's not what you want to hear. They're the ones who call you out on your BS and help you see things from a different perspective.
Those conversations can be tough,
Yeah,
but they're so important.
I agree. We all need that friend who's not afraid to be honest with us, even if it stings a little.
Definitely. What other roles are there?
Well, there's the adventurer, the friend who's always up for trying new things,
Ooh.
dragging you out of your comfort zone.
I love those friends. They keep things interesting.
Right. They're the ones who plan the spontaneous trips, introduce you to new hobbies, and basically inject some excitement into your life.
Exactly. They remind you to be open to new experiences.
Bro.
Embrace the unknown.
Ah.
Okay, so we've got the listener, the cheerleader, the reality checker, and the adventurer. What else is there?
Well, one more important one is the sage. This is the friend who's wise beyond their years.
Yeah.
Always seems to have the perfect advice or insight. They're the ones you go to for guidance perspective, a deeper understanding of yourself.
I love those friends.
Yeah.
They're like your personal Yoda.
Exactly. Offering wisdom and guidance with a twinkle in their eye.
Okay. So these roles are all so interesting. And I'm already thinking about all my friends and what roles they play in my life.
Yeah, me too. It's a helpful framework.
It is. But what if you realize that you're always playing a certain role? Like maybe you're always the listener, but you're not getting that same support back. How do you address those imbalances?
That's a great question. And it brings us back to those red flags we talked about earlier.
Right.
If you're always giving but never receiving, or you feel like your needs aren't being met, that's a sign that something's off.
So it's not necessarily about the roles themselves,
Right.
but whether those roles are being played in a way that's mutually beneficial.
Exactly. And that's where communication and boundaries come in. It's okay to say, hey, I feel like I'm always listening. I need you to listen to me too.
That's so important. We often assume that our friends just know what we need,
Right.
but sometimes you have to spell it out for them.
You do. And if you find it really hard to communicate your needs or set those boundaries, that might be a sign that the friendship isn't as healthy as it could be.
So it's not about blaming the other person,
Right.
but recognizing when the friendship isn't serving both of you equally.
Exactly. And sometimes, despite your best efforts, those needs might not be met. And that's okay.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't mean you're a bad friend or they're a bad person.
Right.
It just means that maybe that friendship isn't the right fit for you at this point in your life.
That's such a healthy perspective. And sometimes acknowledging that truth can be really liberating.
It can be. And, it's interesting how those roles can also shift and change over time.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What might have worked in one season of life
Right.
might not work in another.
Totally. Because we're constantly evolving.
And so are our friendships.
Exactly. And that's okay. It's about being adaptable and recognizing that friendships are dynamic, just like we are. So speaking of dynamics, our source also talks about the importance of having a diverse group of friends. What do they mean by that? And why is it so important?
Well, I think it ties in with what we were just talking about. With those different friendship roles, like if all of your friends are exactly like you, you're missing out on so many opportunities to learn and grow.
It's like staying in your own little bubble.
Exactly. You need to pop that bubble and let in some fresh air.
I love that. And I think sometimes we get stuck in our own echo chambers
Yeah.
without even realizing it.
Yeah, it happens. So how do we expand our circles and connect with people who are different from us? Well, it starts with being open to new experiences,
Okay.
putting yourself out there.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But where do you even start?
Well, you could strike up a conversation with someone at the gym, join a book club, volunteer for a cause you care about.
Oh, those are great ideas.
Yeah, you never know where you'll find your next amazing friend.
It's like a treasure hunt for awesome humans.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, friendship is a two-way street. Be the kind of friend you want to attract.
Right. So be supportive, be kind, be open-minded.
Exactly. And be willing to put yourself out there.
This is such great advice. It's like we're getting a masterclass in friendship building.
I like that analogy. And speaking of building strong friendships, our source also talks about the importance of setting boundaries. But how do we actually go about doing that, especially with friends we've known for a long time?
Yeah, because it can feel so awkward or even confrontational.
It can, especially if you're not used to it. But the key is to remember that boundaries are essential for healthy relationships. They help us protect our own well-being and ensure that our interactions are based on mutual respect.
So it's not about being controlling or demanding,
Right.
but about clearly communicating our needs
Exactly. It's about saying, this is what I'm comfortable with, and this is what I'm not comfortable with.
and being willing to enforce those boundaries.
Yes, even if it means having some difficult conversations.
Because sometimes saying no is the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and for the other person.
Absolutely. And when we set those boundaries, we actually create more space for authentic connection.
That makes so much sense.
Mhm.
It's like creating a container for the friendship to thrive in.
Exactly. And speaking of thriving, our source also mentions this idea of a friendship values assessment. Have you ever heard of that?
No, but it sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
Well, it's about identifying your core values. Things like honesty, loyalty, respect, open communication,
Okay.
and then seeing how those values are reflected in your relationships.
So it's like taking inventory of your friendships
Oh,
and seeing if they align with what you truly believe in.
exactly. And if there's a mismatch, it might be a sign that something needs to shift. Maybe you need to have a conversation with your friend about your values.
Interesting.
Or maybe it's time to create some distance and make space for friendships that better align with who you are.
I love that. It's about being intentional with our friendships and surrounding ourselves with people who uplift us and inspire us to be our best selves.
Wow. This has been such an enlightening conversation.
Me too.
It feels like we've covered so much ground already, and I'm so curious to hear what other insights our source has to offer.
Yeah, there's still so much to unpack, but I think this is a good place to pause.
I know. Okay.
We'll be right back to continue our deep dive into the world of toxic friendships.
And we're back, ready to wrap up our deep dive into toxic friendships. Before the break, we were talking about that friendship values assessment and how it can be such a game changer for our relationships.
It really is.
Yeah.
Sometimes we forget to step back and ask, does this friendship actually align with who I am and what I believe in?
Right, like we get so caught up in the day-to-day.
Exactly. And that's where the assessment comes in. It's like holding your friendships up to a mirror and seeing if they reflect what you truly value.
So it's not just about weeding out the negative ones. Right, it's about celebrating the friendships that truly nourish us, the ones that align with those core beliefs.
Okay. So if you do the assessment and there's a mismatch between your values and a particular friendship,
All right.
what then?
Well, it might be a sign that something needs to change. Maybe you need to have an honest conversation with your friend about those values. Or maybe it's time to create some distance and make space for friendships that are a better fit.
So it's about being honest with yourself and honoring your own needs, even if it means letting go of a friendship.
Letting go can be tough, but sometimes it's necessary for our well-being. And you know what's interesting? Our source points out that letting go can actually be a catalyst for growth.
Really?
Yeah, it can force you to confront your own patterns, examine your beliefs, and ultimately become more intentional about the relationships you choose to cultivate.
It's like you're clearing out the clutter to make space for something new and beautiful.
Exactly. And I think that ties in with those different friendship roles we talked about earlier.
For sure.
If honesty is one of your core values, you're probably drawn to friends who are willing to be that reality checker.
Right. Even if those conversations are hard sometimes.
Exactly. And if loyalty is a big value for you, you probably cherish those friends who always have your back no matter what.
It's about finding those friends who really complement your values and bring out the best in you.
Exactly. And remembering that those friendships will evolve over time.
Oh, yeah. Things change. We change.
Exactly. What works in one season of life might not work in another.
So true. So it's not about finding the perfect friends,
Right.
but about recognizing that friendships are dynamic.
And embracing that evolution, communicating your needs along the way.
Wow. This has been such an insightful conversation.
I agree. It's been a really great deep dive.
It has. And I feel like we've learned so much about the complexities of friendships
Yeah.
and how to cultivate healthier, more fulfilling connections.
Me too. I hope our listeners feel empowered to do the same.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening, remember that friendships are like plants. They need nurturing care and sometimes a little pruning to really thrive.
Very true.
Be mindful of your own needs, communicate openly, and cherish these connections that bring you joy. A huge thank you to our expert for sharing their wisdom and insights, and to all of you for joining us on this journey of friendship discovery. We'll see you next time for another deep dive. Until then, happy befriending.